Naughty Dog was one of the most beloved PlayStation studios. Every game they released was met with critical acclaim and was a commercial success, selling many copies around the world. But everything changed when the sequel to their most popular and influential game franchise was released, The Last of Us Part 2. As you saw in the title of this video, the main topic will be how this very game ruined Naughty Dog's reputation. I'll also be discussing what led to this problem with the company and some of my thoughts surrounding the game. There will be spoilers for the Uncharted series and of course The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, so with that out of the way, let's begin. During the making of Uncharted 3, Naughty Dog had a second team that was developing a new IP led by the company's veterans Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann. The former co-directed Uncharted 1 and 2 and the latter was previously a programmer and a game designer. This new game was initially titled Mankind. The main idea of the project was, what if a deadly fungus that affects ants and insects attached itself to humans? After Uncharted 3 was released, the whole team dedicated themselves to working on this new game, which later on was renamed The Last of Us. The game followed the story of Joel and Ellie, two survivors traveling across America while dealing with dangerous factions and the deadly infected. This new project was very risky because it focused on mature themes and leaned more into the horror genre, as opposed to the company's previous games that had a more light-hearted and adventurous tone. But to everyone's surprise, it was a hit. Everybody loved it and praised the game's thrilling narrative and complex characters. In fact, it changed many people's view of gaming as a whole, understanding that this medium can tell engaging stories with movie-like productions. Naughty Dog at this point was flying sky high with yet another successful franchise, and after the game's release, they decided to go back and finish Nathan Drake's story, but then everything started falling apart. After the unexpected departure of Uncharted 4's director Amy Hennig, the project was in jeopardy, without a finished script and some of the voice actors leaving as well. Some reports suggested that she was fired from the company after some unhappiness with the game's direction. Fans were angry at this outcome and worried that the game was getting cancelled, but Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann took over the project, rewriting the whole script, yet keeping some of the base ideas, like the Avery's Treasure plotline that was already established in the original script, and the locations since they were already completed. Sadly, before release, the game leaked. Chapter descriptions and some pictures depicting the game's climax were out. Fortunately, this didn't stop Uncharted 4 from becoming one of the best-selling PS4 exclusives. Thankfully, the game turned out great, and you could argue it had the most compelling story in the series, ending the franchise on a high note and again receiving critical acclaim. A couple of months after, Naughty Dog surprised the fans with the announcement of The Last of Us Part 2. Many were curious if the sequel was going to follow Joel and Ellie's stories, or if it was going to be a fresh start with new characters, since the first one ended perfectly with them living peacefully in Jackson but with a lie looming over their relationship. And so it happened that the first trailer confirmed the duo's return and teased the game's narrative, with Ellie telling Joel that she's out for vengeance. The teaser left fans with many questions like, who's Ellie after? Is Joel dead? What's going on? Obviously, Naughty Dog didn't answer any of those questions at the time, leaving players excited for what's to come. It was later announced that only Neil Druckmann was directing the sequel, since Bruce Straley left the company shortly after the release of Uncharted 4, leaving some fans disappointed. Development was going well until rumors started floating around that many employees left Naughty Dog due to crunch, which led to anger amongst fans, resulting in people refusing to buy the game and demanding a healthier work environment. What made it even worse is that a couple months before release, major plot points and cutscenes were leaked, making some players angry at the decisions made with the game's story, leading many to form their opinions before playing. At that time, we practically knew the whole narrative structure, like the chapters, twists, and character deaths. Speaking of which, the leak that generated the most amount of commotion was Joel's death. Players were furious at this decision to kill the main protagonist of the first game in such a brutal and devastating way. On top of that, the leaks revealed that during the second half of the game you would play as his killer, a newly introduced character named Abby, which was hated from the get-go due to her killing Joel, and in addition to that, some hated her character design. This problem also invited many new people who knew nothing about the franchise to spread false narratives surrounding Naughty Dog and the game's development, making the whole situation even worse. These leaks later on were confirmed true based on the team's reaction. Every time a new trailer or gameplay was put out, all the comments were turned off in an effort to avoid the leaks from spreading, but the damage was already done. The toxicity and hate surrounding the game was insane, thus leading to members in the company as well as voice actors getting harassed all across social media. Which, if you ask me, it's ridiculous. Firstly, no one should receive death threats, especially for a simple thing like this. Granted, they were from a minority of people, but still, that's shameful behavior. And secondly, it's just a video game. When The Last of Us Part 2 came out, the majority of leaks were proven correct, resulting in a massive negative review bomb on Metacritic and review sites in general. But the majority of review outlets praised the game for its bold story and fun gameplay, which led to it winning multiple Game of the Year awards. Now that I've explained the controversy, in the following chapters I'll be giving my opinion on this polarizing game. I'll assume you've already played the game, so I won't be doing an in-depth breakdown of the story, just my overall thoughts on it. Right off the bat, let me just say that when the leaks came out, I saw them and was disappointed and frustrated with the narrative, leading me to consider not buying the game. But after a few months, I decided to give it a chance, and after finishing it a couple of times, I can say that I'm conflicted with The Last of Us 2's story. I found Joel's death to be a great catalyst to motivate Ellie's journey, but the execution was a bit sloppy. What I mean is, the way Joel and Tommy dropped their guard after entering a room full of armed strangers. I can understand if Ellie fell for this trap since she's young, but the brothers survived for 20 years in the apocalypse. They should have been more careful. During the first half of the game, there are flashback moments. You'd think that in theory they would break the pacing, but they are seamlessly integrated into the story and occur after a long stretch of intense gameplay. It's cool that the flashbacks have their own subplot, with Ellie slowly figuring out the lie that Joel made up about the Fireflies giving up looking for a cure. I also like these flashback moments because you got a chance to spend time with him, and my favorite is the Finding Strings chapter, since there's a combat section where you fight multiple infected alongside Joel. It reminded me of the first game. It's great that throughout her quest for revenge you see how vicious and obsessed she becomes with her mission after each passing chapter. A nice contrast to the sweet and innocent girl from the first game. Overall, the inner conflict Ellie has with herself was very well written, and her portion of the campaign flows nicely and always has a clear goal, chasing down the people responsible for Joel's death. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about Abby's portion. To start, you switch characters in the most anticlimactic way possible. When you as Ellie return to the base in the theater, you're soon ambushed by Abby that kills Jesse while having Tommy hostage. The tension is increasing, and then it cuts abruptly to a flashback where you start playing as Abby. The second half for the most part feels pointless since Abby already accomplished her goal of avenging her father that died at the hands of Joel. Therefore, the majority of her campaign drags a lot due to an uninteresting plot and boring characters. What doesn't help is the amount of bland flashbacks that add nothing to the narrative, especially the first one in the aquarium. In addition to sometimes playing through the same flashback multiple times, like the hospital one. My main complaint is the lack of connectivity between the two stories, where the only time they connect is near the end of day 3 during the confrontation in the theater. They also tried to do a retread of Joel and Ellie's relationship in the form of Abby and Lev. I found this to be a bland way to make the player sympathize with her. Don't get me wrong, Abby's not a bad character, but this plot point seemed pretentious. Unlike many people, I kinda liked the ending. It was depressing, sure, with Ellie letting go of Abby and losing everything she cared about, but at the same time bittersweet, since you see that in the night before his death, Ellie forgave Joel for lying to her about the Fireflies. The ending also leaves her character in a very interesting place for an eventual sequel. Now that I've given my general thoughts on the game's story, I want to discuss the gameplay. It's impressive what Naughty Dog managed to do on the PS4. The graphics in this game are insane. To me, The Last of Us Part 2 and Uncharted 4 are the best looking games on the platform. The animations are amazing, and thanks to that, the movement feels excellent since they implemented the technique of motion matching. In short, based on an archive of hundreds of possible animations, this technique chooses the exact animation needed for the next movement the player makes, resulting in a smooth gameplay experience. Speaking of animations, I need to mention the fantastic and improved workbench. Since the upgrades are shown during gameplay, the workbench is filled with tons of great looking upgrade animations for each gun. You can't deny that the gameplay is fantastic, the encounters are very well designed and the environments are great. The ability to go prone really adds something new to the combat, like being able to sneak around without alerting anyone since you're low on the ground. But I didn't like the dodge mechanic. It got old very quickly with you needing to dodge every enemy attack after each punch you make. I really started to enjoy the gameplay when I got to Ellie Day 2, where combat and exploration are done perfectly, especially in the Hillcrest chapter, where each combat encounter is fun and adds something new to the core experience. For example, with the introduction of dogs, that can hunt you down quickly if you remain in one spot for too long, and the bow, that enhances stealth, making it one of my favorite weapons in the game. My only complaint with the gameplay during Ellie's campaign is the beginning of Day 1, where you explore the downtown of Seattle. The pacing suffers greatly since there are many areas to explore and the encounters are a little weak when compared to the ones later in the game. A nice new addition to the infected roster was the Shambler. He expels an acid cloud that deals damage when you get near him, so it encourages you to move quickly and plan your attacks. I would have liked more battles against this new enemy type as well as some combinations, like a mini boss fight with a bloater and a Shambler. It would have been a fantastic and intense encounter. Over to Abby's portion, the gameplay gets even better, with many exciting and intense encounters, like Haven during Day 3. The combat build-up to the island going on fire is awesome. The whole island is very well designed, and during that point in the game you already have available the entirety of Abby's arsenal, and most likely all of the upgrades as well, making the combat even better. She also gets a cool boss fight against the Rat King. It's a little over the top for Last of Us standards, sure, but heck, it's an intense and fun fight. Even though her guns are great and somewhat overpowered, I still prefer Ellie's arsenal, because they are a little slow, hence require a more strategic approach to each encounter. This is also shown by the design of each character and level. Abby is more tanky, so her combat encounters motivate a more aggressive approach, whereas Ellie is smaller and more agile, encouraging the usage of stealth. The gameplay changes are amazing, making it harder to go back to the original, since every aspect of it was improved in the sequel. To sum everything up, it's a shame that this one game managed to ruin Naughty Dog's reputation based on some unfortunate leaks. Personally, I can't see them recovering from that. The hate and unhappiness with the studio grows every time they announce something new. For example, now with the recent announcement of The Last of Us Part 1 remake. Everywhere you look online is people complaining about how this remake is unnecessary and how bad it looks, which in my opinion none of those claims are correct, but that's a story for another time. In the meantime, even though I wasn't a fan of The Last of Us Part 2, I'm still excited for their next projects, since Naughty Dog created some of my favorite games of all time.